Hey everybody, I'm sorry my output's been so low this month, but you know how the holiday season is for someone like me who works retail as a day job. But you can still support me on Patreon and see previews, work in progress shots, and high resolution images of what I'm working on. So let's get to the theme song. Everybody, this is Wake Angel 2001 coming at you with the first part of a commission for Ashley. And it's my first proper action figure based off of someone from Sonic Boom. None other than T.W. Barker. He was sort of the Lindsay Naegle of the Sonic Boom series. He was a pseudo-antagonist to bring out whenever you needed like some kind of scummy corporate type dude to be the bad guy. He was a ringmaster of a circus that kept the performers there against their will. A scummy lawyer that backed Eggman in a lawsuit against Sonic for injuring him during one of their fights. And of course, he was a bad real estate guy who gouged Knuckles on his rent in a later episode. So, you know, he's just an overall what's the word I'm looking for? Douche. But he is a legitimate character from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, and you know how much I love making villains, so let's get on to making T.W. Barker. So one thing about Barker is that he's actually kind of tall. He's still short in Eggman, but he's almost a head taller than pretty much everyone else, which is kind of interesting. So the base figure is actually an Equestria Girls Flash Sentry figure as opposed to anything more Sonic related. Now you might be noticing that there's a bunch of white parts lying around. That is resin casted duplicates of Jazzwares parts. This is an experiment that Ashley was trying, making casts of Sonic parts so that, you know, for the purpose of making customs, you have ready-made pieces instead of having to track down increasingly harder to find Sonic pieces, you know, Sonic figures to make customs from. It's a process that, if you have the right equipment, is faster and easier than 3D printing even. So, more power to you, Ashley. If you can do this, then I might actually call on you to be a supplier for me in the future. But for the parts in this figure, I would of course use resin cast duplicates of Wave's hands, Jet's boots, and Tails' head, but Sonic the Werehog's muzzle. So, yeah, so I found a way to carve the muzzle and face down so that the muzzle would fit on, and then sculpted Barker's cheek tufts in. I also tried sculpting him with a good brow ridge to give him a bit more of a, you know, a Barker scummy expression, but I don't know. I guess Tails' eyes are a little bit too big because he still looks too friendly. Oh, well, this could be his kind face that he puts on when he's trying to swindle people. I also had to carve a much larger head hole to accommodate the bigger neck for the Equestria Girls chest piece. So yeah, this is a thing, and since this is a resin cast instead of like regular plastic, it didn't melt when I sanded into it. It actually turned into a fine powder, very similar to wood. I actually kind of like working on this with my power tools because, you know, you don't get that horrible melted plastic smell that you're afraid might be giving you cancer. Instead, you get a very easy to sweep up plastic, a very easy to sweep up powder, I should say. I'm not sure if this is a type of plastic. I really don't know. Still, with a proper paint job, it's looking quite a bit more like T.W. Barker. Even has a slight little cocked eyebrow. You know, I thought T.W. Barker was a wolf, but when I read his biography, it turns out he's a dog. I guess, you know, Barker. But, yeah, I guess it's kind of weird that there's a dog character, because in Sonic canon, those are really rare. I mean, outside the comic books, I can't really think of any others, aside from, like, you know, the Avatar character, but that one doesn't even have a name, really. That was a relatively easy part of this, so let's get into the real meat and potatoes, and that is customizing the buck so that it doesn't appear too tall next to regular Sonic figures. Now, modifying the boots to be stuck onto the Equestria Girls figures' leg pegs was simple enough, but the fact of the matter is that this figure is still a bit too tall, so my plan was to shorten the legs a little bit. You can see by those white lines that I drew on the thighs, roughly a quarter inch or so, to bring the shoulder line a bit down more to like So the fact that Amy would be more shoulder height. Like here, it's like barely the distance of her ears reach the shoulder. I wanted like at least the top of her head. Ideally, I would have liked to cut it down a little bit more than this, but like there's only so much of the thigh that I could remove before I would end up compromising the joints and not be able to put these toothpicks in to serve as you know, an internal support for the leg to prevent it from snapping at the connection. So this is about as short as I can make it. I might have been able to make it a little bit shorter, but I wanted to err on the side of caution because I didn't want to ruin the figure. Because, you know, you can always take a little bit more off, but if you take too much off, you're screwed. Ultimately, it's kind of a fudge factor. As you can see here, Amy is about shoulder height to him, so he's a head taller than Amy, but he is still shorter than Eggman by, well, about half a head height. So, even though I would have liked to make him a little shorter, so like maybe he and Amy would be eye to chin instead of top of the head to chin, but like I think this is as good as I can do for the moment. Maybe next time I'll be a little braver and cut into more of the leg, but I like to do that with one of my own figures rather than something that somebody sent in to me, because you know, I can mess up my own toys all I want, but I don't want to mess up a toy someone else sent. Right, so now onto the hands. The resin casting didn't work as well on the hands as it did for the head and boots. Like, some of the fingers didn't come out, but this gave me an opportunity to sculpt on a couple more fingers that had a little bit more of an expressive bend. You know, like the way that Barker gesticulates. That's a common technique for charlatans to distract people while they're talking. Maybe it's a form of soft hypnosis. With the fingers sculpted in and Blaze's spiky glove cuffs cut off, I just had to stick them onto the ends of the arms. There's no wrist articulation, but the figure didn't originally have wrist articulation anyway. And at first this might look like a really crappy paint job for the body, but that's because I needed to put an overcoat, you know, Barker's suit jacket over this. So since the suit jacket was going to be covering it, it didn't really need to look all that great anyway. The suit jacket itself is modified from Rick's lab coat, you know, from Rick and Morty, you know, cut shorter to be like the suit jacket and painted with the red and the darker red. Works out. It fit over the buck pretty naturally and still allows the legs to move. And I even made the little shoulder pads out of craft foam. It's a simple circle with a tab that can stick onto the inside of the coat's shoulder, and then the tassels hanging are a piece of foam with strips cut into it. So it's a pretty nifty little way to replicate the look without limiting any kind of articulation. The boots were no big deal at all. I just painted them. That's all I did. Although they did want the hat as a removable accessory. So what I did was use craft foam to make a good old-fashioned stovepipe top hat like what Barker wears, but with cuts into it to accommodate the ears from the figure. I also made a fully intact, non-modified version of the top hat, which he can't wear, but he can hold. So if you want to display him wearing the hat, you put this one on, and if you want him to not be wearing his hat but holding it, then you can simply take it off and then put the other hat in his hands. So, well, why am I telling you about that when I can just show you the pictures, right? And so here we are with T.W. Barker and his full-on evil ringmaster kind of thing. It's a shame that his name isn't something with P.T., although I guess if he was supposed to be a parody of P.T. Barnum, I guess it would have been a bit too on the nose to give him the exact same initials, so T.W. kind of flows the same way. And oh yeah, he has a tail, doesn't he? I didn't actually specify the tail. Nothing special about it. It's just a classic Tails tail that has been stuck onto the rear of the figure with a tiny bit of epoxy sculpt and some crazy glue. It's not that big a deal. I tried to sculpt him in like a bowing posture, but this is really the best I can do. It has to do with the fact that he has outward going hips instead of forward going hips. I've done a whole discussion on how to put pin disc hips in and how this is not the way to do it. And here is a look at that alternate hat that he can hold on his hand. Really, it's mostly because his hand is stuffed up into it, but you know how that works. And one final size comparison to show how he's shorter than Eggman, but taller than Amy. And Knuckles will be a little bit closer to his height, but still a little bit shorter than him, which kind of works, because this is a dude that was supposed to intimidate Knuckles with his presence. Alright, so that is T.W. Barker. I'm sorry that my output in November has been so low, but you know how this time of year gets for me. We'll see you next time.